My name is Reba Monachin, and I am the Senior Relationship Manager for the GMS Alumni Program. I have worked with GMS for approximately 3 years and in various capacities, first working as a Campus Engagement Manager within API ASF, and then working with all API ASF programs, and now working as the Senior Relationship Manager specifically for the alumni. And we are so happy to be joined here today by one of our alumni who is assisting us in putting on one of our first few webinars within the Ask GMS series. So I will let her go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am an alum. I hail from the class of 2003 from the GMS Scholars. And I'm originally from Pascagoula, Mississippi. That is an actual place, Google it. I graduated in 2007 from Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi. And I went on to get my master's in public health from the University of Southern Mississippi in 2009. And primarily my professional background has been in education. I taught for about 3.5 years, but for the past year, I have been in the field of mental health. I love it. It is it's an area that's near and dear to me. And eventually, within the next few years, I would love to work for a federal government agency that specializes in recovery and mental health.
Great. It looks like, so the reason that we had this webinar here today was to talk about resumes. And for those of you following us online on the live Google Plus page, we are using the hashtag AskGMS to be able to answer any questions that you may have, or also via the YouTube page on the YouTube comments. So it looks like we have one viewer. I'm going to hold on for 1 second and see if we can figure out what's going on. Hold on 1 second. So one of the questions that I often get asked as I've been doing professional development across the nation has been about resumes. So scholars and alumni asking me to look at their resumes, scholars and alumni asking me about the job search in general. And resumes really are your first impression when you are doing the job search. And so one of the things that I wanted to do first off was talk about the resume. And later on this month, we will also be talking about a cover letter. But to talk about a resume and what is a resume? A resume is a brief account of a person's education, qualifications, and previous experience, typically sent with a job application. A resume really should be something that is tailored to a specific job and to a specific job opportunity, to that specific position. Whereas a curriculum vitae is an outline of a person's educational history, professional history, and usually also prepared for job applications, but something that you see more often for something like an academic position, a professorate, a faculty position. And so these are two very different things and used for two very different types of opportunities. A curriculum vitae is something that most of our scholars probably should have in their pocket. They're things that you all should really keep in terms of something that's on your computer with all of your job experience, with all of your internship and fellowship and assistantship experience, but not necessarily something that you should be turning in as your resume. one of the reasons that I asked Amanda to join me today is because Amanda and I have been working together over the past few months through her job search to talk about how to improve her resume. And one of the reasons that I asked her to join today was because she actually has a very when she started, a very good resume. So Amanda, I'm going to show a copy of your resume. And this is the resume that Amanda started off with when we started working together. Would you like to talk about how you came about putting this resume together?
Sure. Well, the original resume, I would say, was just a hodgepodge. I had been using it for the past, I would say, almost 5 years. Basically, after grad school, I had received some help in grad school on it. The formatting was great. I loved it. So I said, hey, I'll stick with it. But within the past year or so, I noticed I wasn't getting as many calls, or I just wasn't satisfied. So I knew something had to change. And so I know I need to start my resume. So last year, I even paid someone to work on my resume. And honestly, she did not make many changes. There was an area, the area you'll see the value offered area was added. That was something I thought, would maybe get me some more calls. And actually, it was a learning experience. It did help me eventually come up with those action verbs, and eventually help me to something we'll talk about later, quantify some things. But it looked good, but it needed a lot of work.
Well, and the reason that I asked you to join today was because a lot of those things that we talked about were often patterns that I saw within other scholars' resumes. So it wasn't just you. It was certainly something that I saw often. So some of these things, when you're looking at your resume, what are the things that you wish that you knew then?
Well, I would say three main things. Three main things that could have helped me then and has definitely helped me now in my newer resume.
About college.
First would be, as I mentioned a bit previously, about quantifying. I didn't quantify any information in that old resume. And as you told me, employers want to see results, and no greater way to see results than with numbers. And so now in my latest resume, I've added numbers, percentages, um, funds that I've raised. So definitely showing some results in what I have done. The second thing is something that I still grapple with personally is I'm a wordy person naturally, so that relate over into my resume. So the second thing was being more concise. I needed to be more concise. And so in my latest version of my resume now, I'm much more concise, still meaty, still keeping in the important points, but much more concise. Lastly, tailoring. I was sending out my resume to whoever, whenever, without even changing anything, just sending it out. And so I learned, you definitely showed me that I need to tailor. If anything, I need to word match. Word matching being using those descriptive and those action verbs, using those action words that they use and putting it onto your resume. And so those are the top three things that I wish I would have known then, but I definitely know now. I quantify, I make it more concise, and I tailor.
Sure. And because these are some very common things, I put together a list of some of those things so that we can kind of go through those. One of the things that Amanda mentioned, I think that really helps you to stand out is that quantifying and qualifying. I think oftentimes we list just the things that we're doing without talking about how much, how many, showing that you have tangible results and showing that there are pieces that you can also bring to that employer, whatever that might be. That also goes with listing your accomplishments and not your duties. And I'm kind of skipping around here, but when you talk about job searching nowadays, it's not like it was 10, 20 years ago. In the 90s, there were a number of different job opportunities, and there were so many opportunities that all you really needed were the qualifications. All you needed to do were meet those minimum qualifications. But now we're at a point where there is a very saturated market, and we have a lot of people looking for jobs and not as many jobs available. So what an employer wants to see, what I as a hiring manager wanted to see when I was looking at resumes was, what are those accomplishments? Like, what could you bring as a candidate to my organization that you've already done? What are some tangible things that you can show me that you would be able to do in this position to take it to the next level? So not just listing out what you do on a daily basis, but really what you can bring to that employer should they hire you. I think that also some of the things that we saw in Amanda's resume were using those I statements rather than using action words. You want to be action oriented, not passive. You want to show that you are able to do the extra step. Make sure that your verbs match. Make sure that you are someone who's not just saying that you're going to do these things, but actually doing them. And I'm going to go back right to the top to the most obvious one, but check for spelling and grammatical errors. That is something that we often think is that we don't notice. We don't see the things that we continue to see, but I can't tell you how many resumes I've seen that folks are using the wrong type of word, using their in the wrong context, using your, capitalizing things that they don't need to capitalize, using words like irregardless, or having verbs not match up. Have someone else that you trust look at your resume. Have someone who you would want to hire you actually look at that and be a second pair of eyes and double check that for you. Amanda mentioned being succinct and yet impactful. This is the first impression that you have when you are applying for a job in most cases, unless you know that employer prior to applying for that position. And so it's really important that you make an impact with the words that you're saying. And if you are unsure of using a chronological, so a more traditional style resume, try a functional resume. And that's actually what I'll show you in just a second with Amanda's resume. She has put together a functional resume that is also extremely impactful. And the last thing that I'll say is be consistent in format, text, and other aesthetics. If you're going to use bullets throughout. If you're going to use paragraphs or put periods at the end of your sentences, make sure you do that throughout. But it's very important that you don't do that halfway through so that employers can see that you can, that you are actually doing that for your entire resume, whether it be 1 page, 2 page, or 3 pages. And that really, the length of your resume also really depends on the type of employer that you have. So many corporate positions, they will only look at resumes that are 1 page because they want it to be tailored to that position. But an academic resume is oftentimes more forgiving, or a higher education resume is oftentimes more forgiving in having those 2 or 3 pages, especially if you have a doctoral degree. So at this point, I also wanted to ask a few questions, address a few questions that we see often. So Amanda, what were some of the questions that you had as you were going through this job search process?
Well, some questions that I had definitely was quality over quantity. Should I be applying for everything that I see, or should I really go after something that I know I'd be a good fit for? So I was like, I definitely was, should I just apply, or should I take my time and focus on a few?
Sure. And I think that's a question that I often receive. I think oftentimes we want to apply to every single position, and we don't realize that sometimes quality is better than quantity, but it's really a balance. And that's a really personal question for you. If you are able to apply to those 30 positions, and those are 30 positions that are exactly what you're looking for, then sure, I would say apply to all 30 of those positions. But if you're just applying just to apply, are you really tailoring your resume to those individual job positions? Are you really looking for positions that help you bring out your passion and really are tailored to what you want to do and would really help you use your strengths? And sometimes you don't even realize what those strengths are because we speak different languages than what employers speak. So an example is, before I worked for GMS, I actually worked at a university setting, and I was working in residence life with resident assistants and supervising a staff across 3 buildings. Within those buildings, having staff meetings, having ongoing individual meetings, really doing a lot of communicating, a lot of presenting. But in my mind, I was just leading staff meeting. It wasn't considered group facilitation. It wasn't considered an opportunity to lead a group and to present a group, because that's not what I called it. I called it staff meeting. And so figure out, what are your strengths? Not necessarily what's the position that I want, but what are my strengths, and how can I utilize those strengths in whatever position that is? So that may mean you apply to 30 positions, but that's going to look different depending on the position. And so you may also just find 5 positions that are actually more useful to you and are actually the right fit for you.
And here's this question definitely gets me in the job search, resumes, and even somewhat in my personal life. So I had an issue, or have an issue sometimes, with the cockiness versus confidence. Am I being too humble? Help me with that.
Sure. So I think oftentimes GATE scholars find themselves feeling like they can't talk about their own accomplishments. And it's true that you don't want to come off as, hi, I am a GATE scholar, and oh, my name is Reba.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to come off as that person, because no one really likes that person. No one wants to hire that person. But at the same time, it's important to have an elevator speech. And it's important to talk about what you do, what your passions are, and what you could bring to that next position. And I don't believe that that's cocky. I believe that that really is confidence in not only who you are, but also your strengths and your abilities. And it's important that you are confident in those things, because if you're not, no one else will be. And so it's in the language that you use in emails, it's in the language that you use in interviews, and especially the language that you use in your resume, how you portray yourself and how you talk about your skills and abilities. It's not personal. It's not about you necessarily. It's about your strengths and what you could bring to that organization. Because as much as they're looking for an employee, you're looking for an employer who can bring out more development in you, who can help you grow, who can build on those strengths. And so it's important to know how to really utilize that and make it work for both of you, because this is a reciprocal relationship. Any good employer-employee relationship should be reciprocal. The organization is getting from you as much as you are getting from it.
Another question.
So we actually have one question from the Ask GMS hashtag. So Jen Hune asks, if you can't get your resume to fit into one page, what do you do? And so I would say that anytime that I look at a resume or look at a job description, look at something that I'm interested in applying to, what I do is print out that job description. And as I go through the job description, I think to myself, what skills do I have that I can bring to this organization or to this position? What skills are they looking for that I may or may not have? And what skills do I not have? And how do those two things collide? And so I go through and I highlight those main things. And then I also make notes about what are other things that I could bring to this position that maybe they don't even know that they want. Maybe this is an opportunity for the organization or for that position to grow. And so after I go through and highlight that position, I make that language meet the positions that I've had or positions that I've been in, but also I make sure that I am able to really go through and tailor every bullet to something that is valid in that job position. So it's really important that you do that for every single position. And for many of those positions, they'll be similar. So if I'm applying to counselor or education positions, a lot of those positions that I'm looking at are going to have similar strengths, similar skills, similar qualifications. And so it's important that you do that, but make the language match. Now, if you can't keep it to one page, what I would say is it really depends on the organization. And it really depends on the position, because if you are someone who has a master's degree, in education, that's okay to have a 2-page resume. In education, I would say, because that's the field that I'm in and I have some experience in that, I would say that my experience has been positive. Something you may also consider is that functional resume. And so I'm going to pull that up right now to show folks the functional resume that Amanda created based on the past few months. So if you look at this resume, it's not based on chronology. It's not based on just what positions Amanda most recently had. It's based on characteristics and skills. And so curriculum development and professional writing are one of the skills that are important to Amanda for her next position. And so if you look through this specific characteristic, compose monthly mediation and outreach reports for review by the District of Columbia Department of Behavioral Health. I happen to know that many of the positions that Amanda is applying to are within the Department of Behavioral Health, because that's the area that is of interest to her. So having that timeline, having been able to quantify that, having experience in that area is going to be really integral in terms of being able to show that she has that experience, being able to show the quality of her experience. Case management is the first topic area, and within case management, she's able to talk about her 25 community-based service providers within DC, averaging 10 consumers per agency. That's really great to be able to show those tangible results. So Amanda, as you were thinking about how to quantify that, what was the hardest piece of that? What was difficult about being able to do that?
First of all, I had never done that before, but the hardest part about it was I literally had to sit there and think, you know, how much do you do at work? You know, like in terms of people you're meeting and the writing that you're doing, how often you're doing. So it just took a lot of me sitting down and thinking about what I truly do. And a lot of times we just say, okay, hey, I write grants. But every quarter, how many of y'all are y'all getting in so many from this organization? What's the percentage of the ones that are being accepted, really breaking down somewhat every task. So I had never done that before, and I never thought about it in that manner. So it was tough at first, but now that I'm in that mode, it becomes easier and easier.
Mhm. That's great. One of the other questions we have is, as a scholar, when should I remove job and volunteer experience from high school? That is actually a really great question. In my experience, and the thing about resumes is oftentimes you have 5 different people look at 5 different resumes and give you 5 different opinions. And so I should say that this is often what I've seen, and this is from my experience what I would recommend. But I would say that high school experience, when you're in college, there may be some high school experience that's relevant for the first few years. As you are job searching, I would remove that high school experience, because what's really relevant to you at that point is what you've done in college, and that more professional, whether it be internship experience, fellowship experience, depending on what the experience is. I have seen high schoolers be able to do really high level work that is relevant to whatever that experience is that they may be applying to after college. But that's oftentimes not the case. I think a lot of times folks are trying to input things that they think are really special, and then maybe really special to them, but may not be completely relevant to what they're looking to do after college, or may not be the level of experience that they should be inputting onto a job search resume. Also, when should you remove college experience from college? And I think that also depends on whether you're looking at experiences that are completely relevant to your position at the time, to your job search, or whether you're looking at positions that are not as relevant, or maybe it's something about the fact that you're 5 years out of college. Mm-hmm. If you are quite a few years out of college, it's probably time to remove those experiences. And so I think that also is a very personal decision and should be based on what those experiences are, how relevant they are to you, and how relevant they are to that position. One of the other things that I think is relevant to the functional resume is changing positions. And I know, Amanda, that's something that you did as you moved from public health to more of a mental health, and working with NAMI, working with mental and behavioral health. How did you show that you had skills from public health? Like how did you show those transferable skills?
Yeah, so my background is also education. I was a teacher, so I moved from the classroom setting into a public health, mental health role. So some people would see that as two extremes, but it's really not. Like a strong action word, manage. I managed a classroom, and so that is something that can still be used within mental health. Definitely the curriculum writing, lesson planning, all of the areas of professional writing can still flow over into my mental health and public health, and definitely my teaching, the teaching in itself, facilitating. I'm a youth mental health first aid trainer, and I facilitate classes, and I train these people all over the district. And so my education background really helps with that. So it's how you think about it, it's how you word it. It's definitely how you can find the similarities. And so that's what I've done in crossing over to seemingly wide sectors.
That's great. And I think that's often a struggle that a lot of scholars have if they are thinking about going into a different area. But I like how you did say you use very strong action verbs. And those action verbs are not reserved to public health. They're not reserved to education. They are words that you can really use: facilitate, provide, retrieve, manage. These are things that transfer across fields, regardless of what your field is. And I think oftentimes scholars and alumni will say, well, I'm not really sure what it is that I want to do. And I have a lot of counseling sessions where it's just kind of talking to people about making the decision of what it is that they want to do. But what they don't realize is oftentimes we have these strengths that you can utilize in so many different fields. And so it's just a matter of being able to transfer that language, but also be able to show that you have these transferable skills and move over from public health managing and using that experience to mental health or teaching or education and showing that you have those skills. So I'm going to pull up another question. So what do I put on my resume if I don't have a lot of experience? So we get this question a lot, especially from our younger scholars and from younger alumni. So Amanda, how did you tackle that when you were first coming out of public health and trying to incorporate your educational experience and other affiliations or other things onto your resume?
Well, I will say this, I like to stay busy. Even if it's a down season where I'm searching for a job, I'm out of work, I'm always volunteering. So I am able to interject some of my volunteer experience in those empty spots. And volunteering is a great way to network, get yourself out there, gain more skills, develop your writing skills. So that was one of the major ways. And also being involved in different type of events and networking sessions and speaking engagements. All of those things can be added to your resume. They show a plethora of skills and shows your confidence and just continuously just adding to yourself, continuously working at that resume, you know. And this is an issue that I had, and me and Reba talked about it. And she mentioned it earlier. You have those skills, you've done it. It's just that you don't know how to word it. And so your resume can really be full if you sit down and really think about the things that you have done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so funny to me that our scholars will do so many different volunteer activities. They'll do so many different, they'll take classes, they will participate in so many different ways with different organizations, but they don't consider it experience. Mm-hmm. And that's just not true, because sometimes there are experiences that you do completely for free that are more valuable than some of the experiences that you have when you're paid. Back when I was in school, I was pre-law and I worked for the U.S. District Court in 2 different districts in North Carolina. And the first experience was, and this was based off just an internship that I was able to get from my university. And so if you have career centers, utilize those. If you have department heads that have internship opportunities, utilize those people and utilize those networks, because that's how you really get your foot into the door for a lot of these different things. And so when I was looking at opportunities in law, I worked for one of the districts where I was paid, and then I worked for another district where I was unpaid. And I was able to do the unpaid position over the summer where I was staying at home. There wasn't a lot of expenses at that point. And so the experience that I was paid for was actually more filing, more kind of getting coffee, scanning. I mean, really minimal interaction with the law and understanding what the law was. When I was working in the unpaid position, I think they felt bad for me because I wasn't being paid. But I was able to do so many more things because they really gave me a lot more opportunity, because they knew that this was an unpaid position that I was able to do for a few hours a week. And they were able to get free help, but at the same time, I was able to learn about the law. I was able to not only work for the judicial side of things, but also meet people in the executive side of things. I was able to translate pretrial histories, which I don't even know if I would be able to do now because of laws and with technicalities and all kinds of things that we have now. But I mean, the point is there was so much opportunity because it was a free opportunity. And so I see scholars oftentimes leave out being an ambassador for GMS, leave out being part of the alumni network. I see folks leaving out these really important experiences, being part of a webinar, because they don't think that it's valuable because they're not being paid for it. And that's just not true, because a lot of those opportunities and experiences are more valuable because you're able to do something that's new and different and gain these same skills that are necessary. When I was applying to the alumni position, when I was considering it, in my mind, I was like, do I have enough alumni experience? And I think that our community oftentimes questions whether we do have the experiences or whether we do have enough of the experience. And I think a lot of other communities will say, and this is something that I actually read in, if you've ever read the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, she says this particularly about women, that women are more likely to say, I don't have the skills, I don't have the expertise to be able to do this job, so I'm not going to apply. But in her particular example, men are more likely to say, I don't have that skill or that experience, but I'm going to apply anyway, and I'm going to figure it out. And so either way, I'll figure it out somehow. Whereas the community that she was talking about, women often don't raise their hands because they're afraid of just that. And so don't be afraid to apply for something because you don't have that experience in terms of your job experience or your work experience, because you may have it in another area. And you never really know all of the different things that employer is looking for. There are the things that are written in that position description, but not necessarily the things that are not written in the position description. They may be looking for someone that has translation skills that is not a requirement, but would be something that is nice to have, or maybe is not in the job description, but is a value of the organization, is something that the organization really cares about and wants to see in more of their employees. And so all that to say, I think that it's really important that we don't sell ourselves short in that way. So I'm going to go back to our Ask GMS questions. Should I put classes that I've taken or objectives? I've seen a number of folks as they graduate from college putting classes or putting projects that they've done within their college experiences as recent grads. That's actually a really great idea, because in the same way that we were talking about these volunteer experiences, classes or class projects or learning CSS, learning these softwares, these are all experiences that I think oftentimes we forget about how valuable they are. So that's definitely a great idea. Objectives or summaries, I think there are two trains of thought on an objective or a summary. Amanda and I actually talked about this when we were looking at her resume, because her resume had an objective or a summary of qualifications. Mm-hmm. Personally, I am not a huge fan of summaries unless they really bring value. So for someone who is managing or has managed a cumulative budget of $300,000, that's something you want to be on the top if that's the type of position that you are looking for. If budget management is a core value for that organization, for that position, then certainly that's something you would want to have at the top of your resume. But oftentimes, the reason that I'm not a fan of objectives or summaries is because personally I think of them as fluff. I've seen so many that don't really say anything, and they're not impactful, and they're not necessarily telling me anything about you as a candidate. So if you are going to do a summary, I would go back to the quantify versus qualify, not versus, quantify and qualify. Go back to the making it succinct and impactful, and make sure that you are doing those things as you are deciding whether you want a summary or objective. Amanda, do you have anything to add about why you decided to take that out for your second resume?
I had, up until that point of me using the old resume, I've seen just so many people use it, you know, and you're taught to have this, or I was taught rather, to have at least one line objective, but I wasn't having any luck with it, you know, so like you said, some areas, they may look for that. They may want you to kind of say something up front like that. But I have found so much success with the functional resume without the objective.
Mm-hmm. So one of the other questions that we have that I think is actually a really great resume question is, are there things that you should leave off of a resume? Particularly, when I think of that, I think of things that you should leave off so you don't fall victim to discrimination. I saw a resume one time where the scholar or alum had a photo of themselves on their resume. All of this is completely your own choice, but that is something that I particularly would not do, because you are open to ageism, you're open to ethnic or racial discrimination, you're open to gender identity discrimination. So that's something that I think that a lot of scholars do often. And what that is giving just too much information. This is a professional experience. This is a professional portfolio that you are building. And so if it doesn't necessarily have to do with your professionalism, the skills that you bring, the experiences that you bring, that may not be necessary to share. There are oftentimes experiences that relate to the positions, but I would also tread lightly in terms of talking about certain areas that may relate, but may also open you up for discrimination, or may open you up to being judged before you're actually able to show your skills and show your strengths and show what you can bring to the table. Let's see. I have revised my resume 1,000 times and I still haven't landed an opportunity. What should I do to stay motivated with that job hunt? Amanda, do you want to take this one?
That is my question as well. I'm actually in the process of searching for a new job as well. And so my brother, my sister, I feel you. I'm there with you. But you just have to stay optimistic. You have to stay positive. Also, you have to take many breaks and see, maybe take another look at your resume, take a look at your cover letter, the way you're writing your cover letters. And also, I know that there's going to be a future Ask GMS webinar, and I can't wait to watch this one, interviewing skills. So definitely always practicing and, you know, staying on top of your interviewing skills. So don't take it as discouragement, and I'm talking to myself right now as well. I'm taking it as a learning process, and each step, what can I do better every step of your way, you know? So just keep at it. Someone's going to bite, you know, eventually someone's going to bite.
Yeah, and it's really important to find your support and find your support system. Applying for a job, applying and being part of this job search is a transition. And through any transition, it's really important to find folks that are there to support you, whether that be emotional support, whether that be professional support, whether that be just someone just to talk to, a friend to lean on. It's really important to be able to have that network. And so don't forget that this isn't personal. This is not about you. And I think that's the hardest thing about the job search, because it feels very personal. It's never fun to be rejected. And whether that is rejected by an individual or rejected by an organization or employer, it's really important to find the right fit. And I think as you talk to a number of different individuals, you'll find folks that have been in positions that were not the right fit. And it's so important that you look for what that fit is. Is the culture of the organization supportive of you as an individual? Is the culture of the organization supportive of the things that you want to do, professional development, personal development? How do you really look at something, and do you look at it the same way as that organization? And so it's really important to think about all of those things. I like to say that the job search is like dating. There's sometimes a lot of rejection, but at the end you'll find the right fit and find that fit that's right for you and be able to stick with it. But you want to make each individual feel like they're the only one in the room. You want to make them feel like you are applying to this position and this is the right position for me. And if it is, then wonderful. But a lot of that you'll find out through the interview process as well. So I wanted to also share, as Amanda mentioned, that in our next few webinars, we will also be doing some other topics on professional development. And so some of those will include, later on this month, cover letters, networking, what a good interview looks like. And along with networking, how do you create that elevator speech? How do you really talk about what your skills and what your qualifications are, and how do you do that in a succinct and impactful way? And then just internships and other experiences and how to make the most of those. Now, if you all have other topics of interest, if you have other areas that you would like GMS to go over, please certainly share those. We are more than happy to go over those. We'll take just a few more questions from the audience and then we will head out. So one question I have is, someone told me to leave my address off when applying out of state. Is that a good idea? This is actually one of those questions that I think a lot of folks disagree on, because in one hand, you don't want to be dishonest about where you're located. But on the other hand, it's not necessarily something that you have to put out there on your resume. So in my opinion, and once again, just my opinion, if I am applying for positions out of state, I don't necessarily put my address. Certainly put your contact information. You definitely want to put ways to get in contact with you, everything else similar to just a normal resume. But I don't necessarily put the state that I'm in, because if it comes to the point where I am willing to go for an interview to that state, some positions will not look at you. Some employers will not look at you for that position because they want to look at someone specifically in state because they have a quick timeline, and they don't necessarily want to go through the hassle of bringing someone in from out of state. And a lot of times it also requires, these positions may also require a presentation. They may require like multiple days of interviews, depending on what the position is. And so they don't necessarily want to deal with that with someone who isn't just locally there in that city. And so it's not a requirement. It's not something that you have to put onto your resume, but it's also a matter of what that hiring manager will think when you are recommended to them and when you are putting that information out there. We'll take one more question, and that is, layout is key. Would you recommend putting one thing above the other? Should volunteer experience go first, education, or employment? So that's actually a very good question, because I think that layout is extremely key, and layout is the first thing that people notice. When employers look at your resume, they take about 30 seconds a lot of times, 30 seconds to a minute. And so bolding certain areas, bolding your titles, making certain fonts bigger, making your name very large, very important. You want them to remember your name. You want them to be able to remember back to the resume that they were so impressed with and not forget that name. So format is extremely important. And I would, after this webinar, I would go through and Google education resumes or academic resumes, science resumes, whatever area that you're in, whatever tailored positions that you're looking for, Google those resumes and try to figure out what it is that folks are looking for. So I would say that if you are a recent grad, education is extremely important, but only next to employment. So whether that's, you want to put the most important things on top or very last, because people remember the first and last things. And so I would put education possibly first, then employment, or employment, and then do education at the very bottom. If there are volunteer experiences that are also extremely impactful, I would also incorporate those. But oftentimes those employment experiences are the things that are going to stand out in terms of being able to bring those skills and experiences. So that is all the time that we have today. We're coming up on 1 hour. So I want to thank you, Amanda Mims, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I'm sure we'll still see lots and lots of each other over the next few months. And I want to thank all of those folks who joined us online. This webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to see it on the Gates Scholars page. And we'll continue checking the YouTube page comments for a few days in case we have some lingering questions. But you're always welcome to email me as well at reba.monachin@gmsp.org or on our alumni account at alumni@gmsp.org. I am located here in Washington, D.C. on Eastern Standard Time, so feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email, and I am happy to set up an individual session with you as well during business hours. So I appreciate all of you watching, and I hope that this was helpful for you, and we will send out an email. Hopefully you're following us on social media at GMS Alumni on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or through our Gates Scholars accounts, also on those same social media pages, and following our next installments of the hashtag AskGMS. So thank you again, everyone. Hope you're having a very good night, and I will leave you at that. Good night.